I'm Myra Seha, and you're listening to Venture Unplugged. From deep tech crypto to direct-to-consumer brands and products, each week we dive in deep into the lives and challenges of today's most successful founders and investors. New episodes launch every Tuesday. Sign up for our newsletter at ventureunplugged.com and subscribe on iTunes or Spotify. Follow me on Twitter at MyraSeha007. I'm really excited about today's episode with Muneeb Ali, the founder of Blockstack, a new internet for decentralized applications. In this episode, we discuss how he raised funding from YCombinator and Union Square Ventures, why he launched the first SEC-qualified token offering, and what it was like to consult for the HBO show Silicon Valley. This is an episode you don't want to miss. This episode is sponsored by Etoro, Qtum, and Luca. Etoro is the smartest and largest crypto trading platform in the world with over $1 trillion in trading volume per year. U.S. customers can trade the most popular crypto assets with low and transparent fees. Best of all, you can connect with 11 million other eToro traders around the world to discuss trading, charts, and all things crypto. Create an account at etoro.com. Qtum is the first proof-of-stake smart contracts blockchain. It has been around for over 2 years and has over 4,000 nodes around the globe. If you're tired of paying high fees on other smart contract platforms, head over to qtum.org. That's QTUM.org and start building your own low-fee Solidity smart contract today. Luke is bridging the gap between the business and blockchain world by providing the leading institutional-grade back and middle office accounting software and data services to the crypto ecosystem. For more information, please go to luca.tech. That's LUKKA.tech. This podcast is co-presented by Blockworks Group and Republic. Blockworks Group is a blockchain events and media production company. For exclusive content and events that provide insight into the crypto and blockchain space, visit them at blockworksgroup.io. Republic is an investment platform that helps companies raise capital from retail investors. For more information, please go to republic.co. Today we're in New York City interviewing Muneeb Ali, the co-founder of Blockstack. Hi, Muneeb.
Hey, nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for inviting us over. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you on the show for a couple of reasons. One, I think you're just such a pioneer when it comes to blockchain technology and also token fundraising. But I've also known you for quite a bit, and I know you're such a wise person and have a lot to say. I'm excited to have the audience hear you Unplugged the way I usually get to hear you. So I'm excited.
Well, thanks for the kind words. And yes, we go way back, all of it when I was in grad school at Princeton, and never thought I would end up working in crypto or doing the kind of things I'm doing now, because I was on a very, very different track when I was in grad school.
That's great. So why don't we provide the audience with a little bit of your background, and then we'll jump into the questions and get started. So in terms of your background, most recently you have been in the news for launching the first Reg A Plus for a public token sale.
Yes.
And I'm sure that's kept you super busy.
So that was the first time that the SEC qualified a token offering, right? So we were working with the regulators to figure out a legal framework. So how can we open up the public markets to token offerings, but do it in a way that is more transparent and the traditional kind of like checks and balances of the public securities markets, they apply to this new asset class as well. So we were very, very excited that we actually go through the door and were the first in US history to get qualified.
It is monumentally huge, and I want to dive in deep to that. Before that, I just want to give a little bit of background. So before that, you've raised venture capital from some of the top VCs in the industry, Union Square Ventures, Harvard's Endowment, and Y Combinator. You've also done a private ICO for around $50 million, and you migrated from Pakistan to Princeton University. And so take us back to the earlier years. So this got founded within Princeton, but let's go back a little bit further. So what was that decision for you to move from Pakistan to Princeton? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so I think I grew up in a small town. Rawalpindi is right next to the capital, Islamabad. And over there, I remember that my computer and the internet connection, which was actually like a stolen internet connection, I was using hacked passwords on ISPs to go online. It was my only window to information. Because otherwise we had a single state-controlled television. So imagine that I'm a kid, I go online and I start discovering that the information that I was getting through the state-controlled TV channel is actually not true, right? So you have this moment of like, wait, like that's not what happened in history, or this is not exactly this way. And I started realizing the power of information, like that if the information is free and anyone can have access to it, it really changes that person. Like I was the only kid on the block who had access to the internet, and I would go and like talk to my friends about it and so on. And I also started taking a deeper dive into computers in general. Like I instead of using kind of like Windows that required a license, I was like messing around with Linux, trying to program it, trying to like see under the hood, like how do things work, and just fell in love with the technology. And I remember as a teenager deciding that I just want to study computer science. That's what I did in my undergrad. Started doing research work during undergrad, which was a little bit uncommon like back in my university. And I remember getting my first peer-reviewed publications out, and which was very surprising for the university that this kid is now, I believe Canada was the first conference that I went to. And my kind of like move out of Pakistan was very logical, at least to me. Like it was basically about, I wanted to work with people I can learn from, like some of the best researchers who would have me or give me the honor of working with them. So first I moved to Europe. I was working in a research group that was very well regarded in the area I was interested in at that time, and spent a summer at Stanford and eventually moved to Princeton for my grad school. So my advisor that I started working with, he was wrapping up his PhD at Stanford.
A lot of people would love to get into YCombinator, and I think a lot of people would also love to, be in the room with some of the VCs that that have backed you. How did Union Square Ventures actually happen? Was it over coffee?
So with USV, I think what happened was I started a course with one of my professors who's actually on the board of Blockstack now, Professor JP Singh. And the course was about startups, right? So if you're an engineer, how do you start a company, or what skills do you need to? It's almost like how to start a company course at Princeton. It's not called that; it's called something else. And in that course, we get a lot of guest speakers. So Fred Wilson from Union Square Ventures was one of the regulars. So every year, Fred Wilson will come in and speak to the students. And I think every year I would like talk to him about like some new thing I'm working on. And it was mostly like usually technically very heavy, like deep tech stuff. And Fred's comment would be, you should talk to Albert. Like Albert is the partner at Union Square Ventures. He has a PhD from MIT and usually looks at like more deep tech kind of things. And eventually I emailed Albert. I think I still have that email. So it's a cold email to Albert saying that every time I talk to Fred, he says, talk to Albert. I'm here talking to Albert. And he was like, just come to my office and we'll take it from there. So this was even before Blockstack, right? So the connection existed. And once with my co-founder Ryan, I was working on Blockstack, and we were looking to raise money. I think it was easy to follow up with Albert and say, hey, this is what we are working on. Do you want to see it? And the interesting thing is, like, when we were, so Union Square Ventures office is nearby. When we were sitting there, I think we showed him the demo, and within 5 minutes, Albert basically like had this gesture of excitement, and he's like, I get it. I love it. Let's do this. I think it's the shortest amount of time in which like some investor like just truly gets what you're trying to do. And later on, we discovered that he has independently written blog posts about such protocols that how they need to exist. So I think it was pretty much like he had his thesis and ideas around that something like Blockstack should exist. And once he saw it, like it was like within 5 minutes, he's pretty much there.
That sounds like exactly product market fit with our investor fit, right?
Yes. That
everybody's kind of searching for. But I think you've talked about sort of, it was a journey. It wasn't just one meeting and done.
So we at the same time when this meeting was happening, I think we applied to YCombinator as well. And at YCombinator, it's a very interesting process. Like they teach you a lot about startups, what to focus on, what not to focus on, and they put this like time pressure, along with they create almost like FOMO for investors, right? Mm-hmm. Like they would put like 500 investors in a room, and create a lot of demand for your round. And I remember that, so it's called the demo day, the final day where everyone's presenting. I remember that somehow our round, or at least the terms, got done the day before demo day. Like there was a Silicon Valley large fund that wanted to come in, and then we obviously had a strong preference with USB given our interaction with them. So we pretty much like verbally agreed to the term sheet with USB before demo day. And demo day started, and imagine that's the big day. And for some reason, like I'm awfully relaxed, and other people can tell. Right? They're like, why aren't you talking to investors? Like, why are you just like, having your coffee and just smiling and sitting over there? I think people can just tell from your energy that you're like not anxious right now. You're actually like not fundraising pretty much because the round is done. And so I was very, very grateful about that, because even YC companies, they go through a fairly long and hard period trying to fundraise. Not all of them. I think around 10% of them very quickly raise money, and then there are some who require like a couple of months, and there are some who just never raise money. So even at YC, the rate of companies that survive is not that high.
So let's talk about your next round of fundraising. So the ICO, the private sale, you raised around $50 million. Why did you decide to do it that way?
We wanted to distribute the underlying token up at the launch of the blockchain. And once we started looking into the legal frameworks, we realized that the US securities regulations actually would not allow us to distribute to the general public, which was, to me, like a little bit of a bummer, right? Like, because our open source community, our developers, people who were very, they're like enthusiasts around the project, that meant that they couldn't participate. Similarly, at around the same time, if you remember, the 2017 was Wild West for crypto.
Absolutely.
Right? Like anyone can throw up a white paper and go out and raise millions of dollars. And we almost wanted to show the industry like how you can do this in a more mature way, in a more sensible way. So the legal structure that we came up was we were making these Delaware funds. And investors, like sophisticated investors, were becoming limited partners in the fund. And the reason to create the funds was we wanted to self-impose milestones on ourselves. That the way the sale happened was, this is what we are going to build. X amount of development has happened, but we still need to build the core blockchain and launch it. And if we are unable to launch it within a specific time period, it was like a year or something, and you'll get your money back, right? So 80% of the capital was actually sitting in the funds, and the money would go back to investors if we don't succeed in delivering on the promise or the technology. Similarly, for people who are not accredited investors, we were like, we can't let you participate. Like, we're not going to be in violation of US securities regulations, but we can give you this non-binding voucher. Let us figure out the legal framework around this, and we will honor the same price as the accredited investors and as the sophisticated funds who are participating right now. And all the work with the SEC actually stems from there. It stems from us fulfilling that promise to our core community that we will honor the same price for you. So the SEC public offering that's going on right now has two parts. One is the general offering where anyone can participate, and the other is the voucher offering. And it's those voucher holders who, after I believe a year and a half, are coming in with the same price when the technology has been de-risked a lot. And it actually gives me great pleasure that we were able to kind of like fulfill that promise to our core community.
And why was it so important to you to have the community participate?
So I think there are two reasons there. One is that these users also become users of the network, right? So you can't have a decentralized network that excludes everyone who's not an accredited investor, right? So you would have a very limited user base that way. So it was very important for us to open up our network to the general public, including the US markets, right? We could have done it by banning US investors. I think most projects, they just move out of the US because they effectively were like, we don't know how to deal with the SEC, so we're just going to ban everyone who's in the US. And we were like, okay, it sounds like a hard problem. Let's sit down with the regulators and figure out a way forward. And opening up the US markets was very important to me because it's not just the users here. Imagine that companies in Silicon Valley who want to build on top of your network, any sophisticated party is not going to have an asset on their balance sheet that might be illegal, right? So there needs to be a very clear regulated path for what is this asset and how can other sophisticated players keep that asset on their balance sheets while they're building on top of our technology. So that was one reason. The other reason is that, so Balaji is a friend of the project and pretty well known in the crypto space. He has this saying that startups start on Sand Hill Road and end up on Wall Street, right? And crypto is changing both ends of that journey, right? So you no longer need to start up on Sand Hill Road or end up at Wall Street. And what that means for us is, imagine the first 100,000 users of Facebook. They had no financial stake in the success of Facebook, even though they made the network. Same with things like Twitter or Medium, where all the content is being generated by people. But because of like certain regulations, they can't actively invest. And there are good reasons for those regulations. So we wanted to enable the early users of our network to actually have a financial stake in the success of the system, but at the same time have the same kind of checks and balances and transparency that you would see in a traditional IPO, right? So our filing looks like a quote-unquote mini IPO filing. It has like audited financials, it has all the risk factors, all the disclosures. Basically, the idea is to reduce information asymmetry between the project insiders like myself and anyone who wants to invest, right? So it's a 184-page like disclosure doc that I hope everyone reads. And what that really does is that the project is still relatively early stage, but the investment opportunity is now open to a very, basically the public markets, which is a very interesting dynamic that does not exist in traditional Silicon Valley startups, where they usually go public after like 10 years or something like that.
Now for a quick word about our sponsors, and we'll be right back. Etoro's crypto trading made easy. It's one of the largest and smartest trading platforms in the world with low fees. Join 11 million other traders and create an account at etoro.com. In addition to being one of the best smart contracts blockchain in the world, with extremely low fees and easy-to-use platform, Qtim's proof-of-stake system lets anyone stake with as little as a fraction of a Qtim. To learn more and start building today, go to qtum.org. You talked about pioneering this entire new category of fundraising. I imagine the road was not easy. I imagine it took a long time. Can you describe the road to this Reg A Plus and some of the challenges that were involved?
Yeah, so I think this was, I believe the time frame is at the close of our last offering, so that would be start of 2018, when pretty much like we made this call that we are going to go down this route. And there was a lot of uncertainty. We had no idea that the SEC would ever qualify something like this. And a lot of other people in the industry were pretty much against this idea, right? Like they were trying to go for other approaches, like putting pressure on Congress for introducing new laws. In my mind, that would take longer, right? Or some projects would actually just go ahead and do what they're doing, and they're like, don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness later. I'm an entrepreneur. I have a very high threshold for taking risk. Potentially violating securities regulations in the U.S. is not one of them. Right? It's like the image I have in mind is like there are these cars coming down and taking you to a very unpleasant place, and it's very hard to come out of there.
Well, orange would have a very different meaning for you then.
Yes.
Orange is not the new black in that case.
No, so there was zero chance of me trying to take a riskier approach when it comes to regulations in the U.S. And the other thing was really like potentially taking the SEC to court. Like, no, I do not want to do that. I would much rather engage with the regulators. And I think for me, the real moment was when I realized that the technology can adapt faster to regulations, then regulations can adapt to the technology. Right? So every time we'll hit some sort of a roadblock, I would rather go back and tweak the protocol so that that particular corner case is no longer an issue for our technology, instead of trying to force a change in the law. Even though there is a lot of work, and I think the SEC deserves a lot of credit, where we were able to successfully present the legal analysis for why a certain regulation basically just doesn't apply to this technology. And the SEC effectively, they agreed in the way that they agree, right? Like, I think if you look at the official correspondence, the comment would look something like, we have no further comments on this particular issue. That does not mean that we agree or disagree. And like it'll go on, but I will take this as, okay, they are not explicitly against our legal analysis here. And I think we're good for now unless they come up with new information and revise their stance.
So you talked about disrupting the venture capital funding system, whether your project can be fully funded through an ICO or not. Did you face any challenges convincing your investors that this was the right path, or did they automatically see the larger vision of how this new way of fundraising can benefit the company?
Yeah, so I think over there, that's why it's critical to have really good investors. I think early on, people shouldn't optimize for valuations or other things. I think you should really just optimize for getting the right investors in. So our earliest investors are Union Square Ventures, Naval Ravikant, YC, SP Angel, and others. And these people are, I think, long-term investors. I think Naval, when he invested, I remember his email. He was sending out an email saying, "This is a research project, might never turn into anything. I'm investing anyway." And I was like, "Naval, are you trying to sell this or like scare people away?" But apparently, like it worked for his syndicate. So he used his syndicate to invest money, and his syndicate just filled up on seeing that email. But it's true, right? It was a risky research project with a very long time horizon. We are building open source software. We don't have a business model. We don't have any revenue. And our investors are effectively saying, don't try to even think about how to monetize this right now, because your success really depends on creating a large ecosystem around your open source technology, right? Unless you do that, it's pointless thinking about trying to monetize right now, right? So they already have like a 10-year horizon in mind. And once we went back and basically told them that here's this new type of a crypto asset, which is very essential to our network, and we are going to launch it, Union Square Ventures deserve a lot of credit. They almost even saw it coming in the Series A. Our Series A had this clause in there where if the company ends up creating a digital asset, they can actually participate on a pro rata basis on the to purchase that asset as well. Right? So they were watching, just like you have pro rata rights on the equity side. They were trying to watch out for those things on the crypto asset side as well, which was, I think, very forward-looking for them. And we did the same thing. We actually offered all of our equity investors to be able to purchase tokens early on when the technology was not that much developed, and 100% of the equity holders actually participated. So I think they saw the value in the underlying crypto asset and basically came in.
Through this process, what have been the biggest challenges? So I feel like every hero has their own challenges, whether it's man against machine, whether it's man against man. Like for you, has it been more the regulatory kind of hurdle and execution, or the technology itself? It's what you're doing is inventing something completely new. What are the biggest challenges?
I think the biggest challenge is a good friend of mine. I took some time off and I was spending time with his family recently, and he said that you're actually running like 5 to 6 different startups, right? Like this is not just one thing, and I think it's true. If you look at like all the work that we're doing, there is the core technology, the R&D piece, which I used to directly work on, but then I hired other computer scientists that I really respect, and they've kind of like taken that over. Over there, you're effectively trying to invent new types of internet protocols and systems that are going to effectively replace cloud computing. Right? Just doing that R&D is a company in itself, right? That company would just do that, try to commercialize it or get acquired by a larger company. And for us, it's like 1 out of 5 or 6 things that we're doing, right? Like we are also building the developer tools. Like imagine kind of like a Twilio-like easy to use interface or a Stripe-like interface for interacting with this technology. And that's hard. Like when Twilio was trying to do that, the telco infrastructure existed, and they're writing the developer tools to interface with the telco infrastructure. We are creating the infrastructure and writing the tools around it. And then there's a completely different almost area, which is user-facing stuff, right? Like we had to build a new browser. We had to help so now there are 170 startups or applications built on top. All of those startups are using our tools and the interfaces that we have for login, for storage, and other things. They're using, basically, our interfaces are being used by their users. Right? So there's a huge user-facing component to what we are doing, and then add all the work around regulations, like even a small thing. Like, for example, let's say there are new employees who are joining, and we are trying to figure out how to give them grants in tokens. And we would come up with a legal structure that looks similar to like a restricted stock option, but for tokens, right? So nothing is simple. Like everything has to be like we'll have to like brainstorm new things and new structures. Even the legal and finance department over here is actually a pretty interesting place to work at.
Do you believe 5-10 years from now, people will move away from the traditional Facebook to something like your system, or what is your vision there?
Yeah, I think I almost look at this as a new type of a computing platform, right? The analogy would be when mobile devices came, this was just something like so new that an entire ecosystem around it had to develop. Like imagine developers first had to learn how to make mobile apps. And the initial versions of mobile apps, they looked like, okay, this is something that I can also do on the normal desktop, but now it's on my cell phone device with some kind of tweaks. And later on, we started seeing native applications, right? Like applications that only make sense on the mobile device. Like for example, Uber. Like it makes no sense to run Uber on your desktop, right? Like it's a native mobile application. We are seeing similar things with decentralized computing, that it's a completely new way of building applications. And in the initial versions here's Google Docs, but decentralized. Here's an Instagram-like app, but decentralized, right? And the next step is going to be when we start seeing native applications, like potentially with smart contracts, where the functionality that is available is something that simply could not exist on the traditional cloud computing or internet.
And what do you think is the biggest barrier to entry in terms of people using crypto on a regular basis?
I think it has to be onboarding, and we spend a lot of time on onboarding because there's a very fundamental trade-off. You have to educate people about their private keys, and you have to make sure that the private keys are secure. But people are used to just signing up with a username and a password, and they think that if they lose their password, they can always go back and reset it. Right? So there's a fine line between how hard the onboarding is and how secure your credentials are. Right? And we have done a bunch of iterations of our onboarding, and we are working on that. But I do think that once a lot of the population they can set up their initial wallet, things actually become easier after that. Because on Blockstack, for example, if you register your username, it's a universal username, you can use the same thing on every single app, right? So it's like a one-click login to everything. There are no passwords. But the initial setup is something that's a little bit of a hurdle. Interestingly, I was in Asia recently, and I noticed that in Korea, more than half of the population actually has crypto wallets. So there are certain countries in the world where I think it's actually getting like mainstream adoption.
I'm curious, do your parents have crypto?
No, they don't, but I think they have crypto by proxy. Like they would ask my sister to go and like buy some.
That's great. Yeah, they're probably overexposed with you on some of that crypto.
Yes, like I am definitely overexposed. I used to. There was a time when I had all of my not that I had a lot of savings, but I had all of my savings in crypto. This is when Bitcoin was 100 something. And I would cash out on a weekly basis for my expenses.
Wow.
So at some point, my wife talked me out of it.
That's great. And so let's switch gears to something fun. A lot of people, or some people may know, that you have also been advisor to the HBO show Silicon Valley. Mm-hmm. Give us some funny experiences there.
Okay, so this was season 5, where I was the advisor, and they were very they're very thorough, right? Sometimes I would have a call with them where they would share a diagram, and they would be like, give us some technical input on this diagram. Does it make sense? And I would suggest a different architecture, or this area, doesn't make sense. Maybe we want to design a storage system slightly differently. And later on, I would find out that thing that I gave them feedback on was just something on a whiteboard in the backdrop of a scene. But they were so careful that they even wanted to get that diagram technically correct, and they would get feedback. And then I think sometimes you also the writers are just writing the new content on the fly as the season is kind of going on. That's what I think happens. So I think at some point they had a plan to launch a quote-unquote ICO on the show, and they asked our team to write the white paper for it. And it was going to be the actual white paper. And they described the the scope of the paper. They were like, you guys can write whatever you want and just crack jokes and there. And you can even have a reference to the Blockstack actual paper in the Silicon Valley show hypothetical white paper. But it was actually going to be a lot of work for our team. We're still a very, very small team. So what we did was we just gathered around everyone around our kitchen, and everyone was just pitching ideas for what could be funny that can go into the paper, and we were just generating material that way. I think in the end, the writers decided to go in a slightly different direction, and they never launched that ICU paper. We also never wrote it, so I don't know who dropped the ball. But it was a fun experience just collecting all the material around the white paper.
That sounds like so much fun. And I think, definitely when I was watching, I was like, wait, the new internet, this is incredible. It definitely reminded me of you. And I think that's incredible work, I think, helping spread the word and making it more accessible. So I'm sure you had a lot of fun doing it.
No, it was great.
Well, that sounds like a great story, Muneeb. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, why don't we jump into rapid fire?
Sure.
All right. So the first question is, how much do you sleep?
I these days try to get 6 hours. I used to be worse before.
What was the last good book that you read?
Last good book, Hard Things About Hard Things.
What is your biggest life hack?
Waking up super early in the morning.
Do you believe in God?
Yes, I do.
Do you believe you're lucky?
I do think so.
What is the worst advice you ever received?
I don't know if this was advice, but I think I've stayed in academia for a very, very long time. And it was a combination of all the advice I think I got. If I would do it again, I would probably quit school much, much earlier.
Who do you follow on Twitter?
A bunch of people. It's public, but if I was going to follow just one person, it would probably be Naval.
Do you meditate?
I really try hard to meditate in the morning.
At Blockstack, which round was the hardest?
Every round is unique in its own way.
Who are founders that you admire?
Patrick Collison at Stripe is one of them.
What is the best piece of advice you have for founders just getting started?
I think just go and read every essay by Paul Graham.
What do you do when you feel demotivated?
Just reset the clock, meditate, sleep a little bit more, and learn and tell yourself that you need to survive to live another day.
What's one word to describe high school Muneeb?
High school Muneeb was very externally focused, look for validation externally, whereas now mostly I try to focus internally.
And what do you want to be remembered for?
Hopefully Blockstack.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Muneeb, for coming on the show today. This was fabulous. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming here.
Thank you. Thanks so much for listening to that episode. Luca is bridging the gap between the business and blockchain world by providing the leading institutional-grade back and middle office accounting software and data services to the crypto ecosystem. For more information, please go to luca.tech. That's LUKKA.tech. New episodes go live every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time. If you want to continue the conversation, you can find me on Twitter at MyraSeha007. And I'll see you next time.